A lawyer in trouble, but won the unwinnable murder case. Changing fate also shakes the soul. Just said, the truth is the only one. Chapter 1. In 2003, a horrific murder case shocked the whole of Hong Kong. Do you remember? The newspapers at that time were full of sensational headlines. The case was called Miss Lien Murder Case by the media. Miss Lien is how Hong Kong people call women from the mainland. The murderer came from the mainland, possessed a gorgeous appearance but extremely cruel behavior. Every detail of the case was shocking, and was scrutinized to the end by reporters. Lam Tu Lin, 36 years old, from Fujian. She went to Hong Kong to visit relatives and met Lam Chi. The two quickly got married and brought her 13-year-old daughter to Hong Kong to settle down. Soon after, Lam Tu Lin revealed her true nature, often having affairs. When discovered, she proposed a divorce. But Lam Chi resolutely refused, and the tragedy began from there. She planned a trip to Chow Sun Island. Lam Chi, believing that his wife had repented, happily agreed. But unexpectedly, it was a trip with no return. On the day of the incident, Lam Tu Lin put sleeping pills in Lam Chi's tea, then took him to a deserted beach. Taking advantage of the time when he was still drunk, she used a stick to beat him to death and then threw the body away. According to the first witness who discovered the body, Lam Chi's body seemed to have been crushed, his limbs were smashed to pieces. The scene was extremely horrifying. Hong Kong media called this case Miss Lien the Snake Killed Lam Lang, referring to the cruelty of the young wife. The case quickly spread, making Miss Lien a name condemned by the whole society. But at the same time, there were also many people talking. And I did not expect that I would also be caught up in this vortex. Chapter 2. That year I was 27 years old, had just obtained a law degree, rented a small office in the fake water and land and started practicing independently. Being a lawyer is not for fame and profit. But I did not have a master to teach me, nor did I have any connections or support. Life was extremely difficult, I could only make efforts on my own. To find clients, I even went to Fujian restaurants, handing out business cards to the aunties. Perhaps this was fate. It was that business card that helped Lam Tu Lin's daughter, Lan Kiet, find me. Lan Kiet, 19 years old, had just graduated. Having no relatives, and not enough money to hire a lawyer, I asked for help from a cheap person like me. I accepted without hesitation. Because I knew clearly, this case was a great opportunity. The media was following closely, it would definitely attract attention. With attention, there would be fame. Even if I lost the case miserably, I still had a chance to become famous. As a lawyer, I cannot be afraid of failure. The Hong Kong judicial system allows lawyers to take cases directly from their clients, without going through an administrative lawyer. My colleague and close friend, Wang Xiaoya, and I took on the case together. When I received the case file, I realized that this was a more difficult case than I had imagined. As one tabloid newspaper wrote, a case that cannot be won. Because the evidence was too clear. On the day of the murder, Lan Sholian took the earliest train back to Hong Kong and hid in a hotel. The next day, she was arrested by the police. During the interrogation, she admitted very quickly, only saying one sentence, "I killed." Other than that, she did not say anything more. On the witness side, Lam Chi's family confirmed that Lam Tu Lin had repeatedly requested a divorce but was rejected, so she had a motive for murder. Another witness once heard her scream into the phone, "Lam Chi, he is a bastard, I will kill him." In addition, someone saw Lam Tu Lin appear near the scene on the day of the murder, her whole body was soaked, looking extremely panicked. On the physical evidence, the police found a set of bloody clothes in a trash can near Chow Sun Island with the victim's DNA and Lam Tu Lin's fingerprints. In her handbag, there was also a bottle of sleeping pills identical to the type found on the victim's body. With the suspect confessing, physical evidence and witnesses, the judicial office officially charged Lam Tu Lin with premeditated murder. But I'm not afraid difficult, but on the contrary, it made me more determined. First, I had to find the suspicious point. At the Lai Chi Jiak prison, we met Lam Tu Lin. The Hong Kong media did not exaggerate. She was indeed very beautiful. Although her face was gaunt, she could not hide her beauty. It was just that her spirit was very poor, her eyes were absent-minded, and she did not say anything the whole time. Only when I mentioned her daughter, did she show a little emotion. But when I thought I could exploit it, she disappointed me. I killed. There is nothing more to say. You guys go. On the way back, Von Tuda asked, "Does it feel like something is wrong?" I replied, "Obviously there is. Such a beautiful person, how did she end up in this situation?" He sighed, "Let's talk seriously. Lan Jia mentioned this case before, that Lin Ji often abused Lin Xiaolian. I just noticed, her hands have many old scars, which match what Lan Jia said." I said, "Violence is a very good self-defense point. If you kill someone in self-defense, it is legally reasonable. But normal people facing a prison sentence will instinctively find a reason to defend themselves." Yet she didn't mention it at all, admitting guilt so frankly. It's not right at all. Also, her actions after committing the crime are very strange. Why did she throw her bloody clothes into a public trash can? This is like self-incrimination. There must be a hidden motive behind it. Wang Xiaoya nodded. She didn't resist, willingly accepting the punishment of the law. The person who killed the abuser, but did not deny the crime. Not because of conscience, but because of a deeper reason. Chapter 3. Immediately after that, we met Lin Jia Xiaolian's daughter. She brought a life insurance policy worth 5 million Hong Kong dollars. The insured person was Xiaolian, and the beneficiary was Lin Ji. Lin Jia believed that it was Lin Ji who planned to kill her mother to take the insurance money, but unexpectedly Xiaolian resisted and killed her in return. But if that was the case, why did Xiaolian confess? The next time we met, I decided to be frank with Xiaolian. We already know the truth. Lin Jia was the one who completed the final act. She killed Lin Ji after she only knocked him out. Hearing this, Xiaolian turned pale, tears welling up in her eyes. Yes, I was the one who covered for her. She still has a future ahead of her. I beg you, let me take responsibility for my child. I was faced with a choice. If I revealed the truth, Lam Kayat, a 19-year-old girl, would face a heavy prison sentence. But if I hid it, I would betray my own professional ideals. After many sleepless nights, I chose to protect Lam Kayat and follow Tu Lin's wishes. Sometimes, the law is not only absolute justice. It is also a consideration between humanity and responsibility. After blinding the eyes, the choice was no longer difficult. Decision: bury the truth and push Lam Tu Lin into the light. When the decision was made, she burst into tears and said, "Thank you. Thank you." Chapter 4. I ran around everywhere, collecting evidence, strategizing my defense, preparing for the upcoming trial. At Lin Xiaolian's request, Lin Jia was removed from the witness list. This made Lin Jia extremely confused, because she was the one who could prove Lin Ji's long-term abusive behavior. Every time Lin Jia came to ask, I tried to avoid it. Finally, one afternoon before the trial, she couldn't take it anymore. "Tell me the truth, why didn't you let me testify? Don't you want my mother's sentence to be reduced?" I was silent, only replying, "The witness list has been submitted to the court, no more can be added." Lin Jia was angry, shouting, "What's going on? It's obvious that you're deliberately obstructing the testimony." I sighed. Why pretend to be innocent? Her mother had done everything to protect her, not wanting her to face the public opinion, and even more so not wanting to be questioned by the prosecutor to the point of revealing any flaws. This is the best strategy. We have calculated every step. Lin Jia frowned, her eyes filled with suspicion. I admit that I lied. It is true that I was on Jiuzhou Island that day, but because my phone ran out of battery, I couldn't contact my mother. I spent the night in a 24/7 coffee shop, and only received news that my mother had returned the next morning. I didn't kill anyone. Hearing this, my mind was spinning. If what Lin Jia said was true, then all my judgments about the real murderer were wrong. So does your mother know where you were that day? No, I didn't say. Then why did you lie? My mother told me not to let anyone know that I was involved in the case. She didn't want me to be implicated. The trial was only 1 day away. I rushed to the detention center to see Lin Xiaolian. As soon as I saw her, I immediately asked, "Why did you lie to me?" She lowered her head and didn't answer. I couldn't help but say directly, "You deliberately misled me, making me think that Lin Jia was the real murderer. If you had cooperated with the police, you could have proven that you were only defending yourself and reduced your sentence. But you didn't do it. Why? Who are you protecting?" Lin Xiaolian shed tears and whispered, "There is no one else. I am the murderer. I killed." I stared into her eyes, trying to find any sign of deception. Apart from her daughter, she had no other relatives. Who was worth sacrificing everything to protect? Finally, I sighed and asked, "Do you think this is worth it? Protecting someone else, even if it means putting your own daughter in danger?" Hearing this, Lin Xiaolian burst into tears and sobbed, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know I'm making things difficult for you. Just back off and let me take care of everything." Back off? How could that be possible? I had worked so hard to get to this point, how could I turn back? I knew that with her stubborn personality, no one would be able to change her. If I continued to investigate, I would definitely be eliminated from the case. Then, I will do as she says. After all, there is no evidence to show who the real culprit is. On July 21, 2003, the first trial of the case officially took place. The auditorium was packed with reporters. The prosecution, knowing they would win, sent only a lawyer with average experience to present their arguments. As expected, they called Lin Ji's sister, Lin Xiaolian's colleague, the witness on Jiuzhou Island, and the forensic doctor to testify. The evidence presented included blood, a bottle of sleeping pills, and the murder weapon, a large stone, about 23 centimeters in diameter. The prosecutor described Lin Xiaolian as a cruel woman, willing to be ruthless in order to achieve her goals. I sat quietly listening, pointing out the loopholes in the testimony, and maintaining a calm, professional attitude. Chapter 5. When piecing together stories, the truth is sometimes just what people choose to believe. The fierce confrontation. I spoke up to refute, just because you are an insider, you easily ignore the truth to smear others? This is blatant slander. Then, I turned to the jury and said, "Your Honor, the witness's testimony is based entirely on hearsay, not eyewitness accounts. Their assessment of the defendant is biased and does not reflect her true character." Next, Lam Tulin's neighbor, Mr. Lai Du Khan, was summoned as a witness on our side. He recounted the catching in the act incident that the prosecution had mentioned. That day, Ms. Lam's water pipe broke. I helped her fix it, but I was afraid my clothes would get wet, so I took off my coat. My wife was also there. Who would have thought that Lam Chi would come back, without asking clearly about the situation, immediately chased my husband and I away and even beat Ms. Lam. I presented evidence. Your Honor, please present Exhibit PP12, the police report after Mr. Li reported the incident. This report clearly states the truth of what happened. In addition, here is Exhibit PP13, the defendant's medical records. According to it, Lam Chi abused her to the point of breaking 2 ribs, showing the seriousness of the violence. I continued to ask, after that, did Mr. Li see Lam Chi beat Ms. Lam again? He sighed, "It happened all the time. I even advised her to report to the police, but she just told me not to interfere, because if she reported it, she would be beaten even more severely." Is Ms. Lam a good mother? Of course. She loves her daughter very much, loves her as if she were her own life. Lin Xiaolian's colleague, Ms. Lu Jiazhen, was also invited to testify. Ms. Lu said she had heard Lam Xiaolian say that she wanted to kill Lam Chi. I asked again, "Ms. Lu, if it is true that Lin Xiaolian once said she wanted to kill her husband, what do you think was the reason?" It must have been because she was beaten too much. Did she ever tell you about the abuse? Not directly, but when I was changing clothes in the bathroom, I saw that her body was covered in bruises. Anyone who looked at it would understand what had happened. I presented to the jury, Your Honor, from the police report to the witness testimony, everything proves that Lin Ji had physically and mentally abused his wife for a long time. The prosecutor interrupted, objection. The defense attorney is making speculations, deliberately defaming the victim's character. I replied, Your Honor, the scars on the defendant's arms and face are the most direct evidence. The judge announced, objection is denied. I continued, Lin Ji once falsely accused the defendant of adultery, but there was no evidence to prove it. On the contrary, he often insulted and abused her, causing her to fall into depression and have to take sleeping pills to be able to sleep. Even when she was abused, she still tried to go to work, take care of her family, and try to be a good wife and mother. How could such a woman be called as vicious as a snake? After my defense ended, the jury's expressions gradually changed, from tense to thoughtful. However, this was only the beginning. The prosecutor continued to summon the forensic doctor to testify. The doctor said, the victim died from severe traumatic brain injury, caused by a blunt object. The prosecutor continued to ask, the victim's face was severely damaged, enough to show that the perpetrator intended to kill to the end. May I ask, is this correct? Yes. That is, the defendant used a rock to repeatedly hit the victim's head, to the point that his face was completely disfigured, is that correct? In terms of speculation, it can be said that way. I stood up to object, objection. Judge, objection accepted. It was my turn to question, Dr. Chu. In the forensic report, the injuries to the victim's head were all determined to have occurred within 24 hours. But the report did not specify whether these injuries were continuous or intermittent, right? That's right. That is, the possibility of a break between the blows cannot be ruled out, right? Yes. But just now, the doctor said that the blows were continuous. So, is there a contradiction? Neither possibility can be ruled out. I continued, Your Honor, Lin Ji's company is actually just a cover for bringing customers to casinos. He himself is a gambler with a lot of debt. I presented Exhibit PP14. Before the incident, Lin Ji had bought his wife an insurance policy worth 5 million yuan. His gambling debt also matched this figure. Next, I presented Exhibit PP15. The records show that the victim booked a trip to Jiuzhou Island right after purchasing the insurance. What made him suddenly so enthusiastic about inviting his wife to travel? The truth was that Lin Ji deliberately took the defendant out, plotted to murder him, and then created a fake drowning scene, in order to seize the insurance money, but the defendant was completely unaware, and had to kill him in self-defense. The reaction was dramatic. The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. The prosecutor immediately stood up, objection. The defense attorney is making baseless speculations, deliberately misleading the jury. The judge nodded, objection is valid. Defense attorney, your speculations lack supporting evidence. Pay attention to the wording. I bowed my head, yes, Your Honor. I continued to present, please present exhibits PP16 and PP17, security camera footage from the villa on Chow Island. The camera clearly recorded that at 9:20 a.m., the defendant and the victim left the villa. According to calculations, they would arrive at the beach at around 9:35 a.m. According to the witness's testimony, the defendant returned from the direction of the beach at around 10 o'clock. Is it enough for a small woman to kill the victim and completely destroy the body in just 25 minutes? This is almost impossible. In addition, the second recording, from an all-night tea shop near the beach, shows the defendant appearing there after leaving the beach. She sat alone for about an hour. At 11 o'clock, the camera at the villa recorded her returning. And just 2 minutes later, she left again. If the defendant really planned it in advance, why did she return to the scene? This is clearly very unusual. I continued, because the defendant's spirit was severely affected, she could not testify in court herself. I will explain on her behalf. After the victim took her to the island, she felt uneasy. She tried to give him sleeping pills to calm things down. But who would have thought that Lam Chi would drag her to the beach in the middle of the night? There, he suddenly became aggressive, pushing her into the water to drown her. In an attempt to defend himself, the defendant accidentally picked up a rock and hit him hard on the head. Lam Chi collapsed on the spot. The prosecutor immediately objected, "Objection. Up to now, the defense attorney has not presented any evidence to prove that the victim attempted to murder the defendant. What the attorney said is just an excuse for his client's murder." I calmly replied, "Your Honor, there were no witnesses at the crime scene, so we cannot rule out any possibility. I ask the jury to consider all avenues of suspicion." The judge nodded. "The defense attorney may continue." I continued, "After seeing the victim fall, the defendant was scared and ran away. She did not dare to return to the villa immediately, but hid in the tea shop to avoid retaliation. After a while, when the victim did not return, she began to feel worried and decided to return to the beach. There, she discovered that Lam Chi had died. The defendant was both distressed and frightened. Influenced by superstitious rumors, she believed that if she did not destroy the body, his spirit would return to take revenge. Therefore, she continued to beat the body. Although the act was in self-defense, the defendant still felt extremely guilty. After being arrested, she immediately admitted to the murder, but the truth is that she was completely innocent. The prosecutor asked, "If it is true as the defense attorney said, that the defendant killed the victim in self-defense, why did she not report to the police immediately when she fled? Why did she not report to the police when she returned to find the victim dead and instead destroyed the body? Her actions of fleeing and destroying the body clearly show that this was a premeditated murder." I replied, "Your Honor, the defendant is an uneducated woman who is unfamiliar with the law. She did not understand that she had the right to self-defense, nor did she know how to seek legal protection when she was abused for a long time. Because she was too injured, she acted on instinct, running away to protect herself, and then the signal led to the discovery of this body. The defendant never wanted to hurt anyone, but an unhappy marriage brought her to this tragic situation. If there is the most pitiful thing in this project, it is the report." After the construction site, the members were generous around me. "Lawyer, do you really believe that Lam Tu Lin is innocent? I heard that Mrs. Lam immigrated to Hong Kong with her stepmother since she was young. Could it be that situation that made her become lost and act like that?" I stood there laughing and said, "The trial is not over yet. I will not answer at the moment." However, when I returned to the office to continue preparing the documents, one of my staff caused a serious injury. The recording was from a radio program called Horror Stories. An elderly man recounted, "Oh my God, I saw a ghost." The host asked again, "Have you seen a ghost? Then, try it." The man replied, "Not long ago, I found a man whose head was smashed and his body was dismembered. I even saw his ghostly spirit standing there, staring at me. It was so cold, it was so scary." The host laughed, "Be careful, don't joke." The man confirmed, "I'm telling the truth 100%. If I'm lying, I swear I'm not a scammer anymore." After listening, I felt cold again. A sense of unease began to rise. The supporter joked, "What, are you scared?" I didn't answer, just silently shortened a document from the service file next to it, then she looked at it. Then, I slowly said to him, "What evidence proves that the deceased is Lin Ji?" The relatives identified it like this, then based on the fingerprints on the object and the fingerprints of this person, it was basically confirmed. Initially, they also determined a DNA test, but the results showed that Lin Ji was an adopted orphan, not related by blood to the adoptive mother. The teeth of this species have all fallen out, and the remaining part does not match the dental records. In addition, Lin Ji has never had his teeth examined, so there is no data to compare. Finally, Lin Ji's adoptive mother once cut a piece of her son's hair to pray for blessings, and kept it in a cloth bag. The police compared the DNA from the body, the hair in the cloth bag, and the hair on Lin Ji's comb, and the results all matched. Therefore, this identification can be accurate to Lin Ji. I repeated a bit, looking at the support with a dangerous gaze. But if the hair in the cloth bag and on the comb had been changed before, then what if the corpse was not Lin Ji in the first place? The support man's eyes widened in surprise. "You mean, that corpse is Lin Ji? Oh my God, this is shocking news." I replied coldly, "So, the man that the old man saw coming back was the ghost Lin Ji." The assistant stammered, "If Lin Ji is not dead, then who is the other person?" Oh my god, this is so confusing. Wait, isn't what you said just speculation? Maybe the old man just made it up to get views, and we are too gullible? I looked at him, my voice lowered. If that's the case, why did the murderer smash his face and disfigure the body? Maybe it was to hide the fact that the corpse was not Lin Ji. There are no such coincidences in this world. The assistant thought for a moment, then scratched his head. If it's like what you said, then the murderer is so skilled that the police didn't discover anything. The story turned around again, bringing me into a spiral of unexpected possibilities. I began to doubt, had I fallen into a cleverly arranged trap? After a few days of contacting, my assistant finally found the old man in the story. He was living near the wharf in Hong Kong. We went to a small grocery store, where he often went. When he saw us, the old man seemed quite surprised. Are you journalists? The assistant hesitated. Not really, I just want to ask. Please call me Az. Then, I took out a photo of Lam Chi and asked, Sir, after the incident, did you ever meet this person? The old man nodded firmly. Yes, it was him. I continued, are you sure you didn't get it wrong? Definitely. This person came to my store every day to buy cigarettes. His attitude was grumpy, and he even scolded my nephew. How could he be wrong? So did you ever meet this person again after that? No, I haven't seen him since I heard about the case, but before that, a week after the case happened, he came back once, but it was very strange. He stood there, staring at me, his eyes were very scary. Then I didn't see him again. Did you tell the police about this? No, why tell the police? Who would believe such things? Leaving the grocery store, we fell into silence. While I was thinking, the assistant pointed to a warehouse about 50 meters away. Look, there's a security camera installed there. I nodded. Let's get to work. After hours of checking each frame in the video, we discovered a suspicious scene. On the afternoon of the second day after the case, around 2:15 p.m. a man who looked very similar to Lam Chi appeared in the frame. However, because he was standing quite far away and wearing a hat, his face couldn't be seen clearly. I said, judging from his figure and clothes, it's highly likely to be him. My assistant was startled. What do you mean? Lin Ji isn't dead? If so, who is dead? And why did Lin Xiaolian confess to murder? My mind is all messed up. I coldly replied, do you think the truth is that easy to find? Let's go, find a way to continue the investigation. According to the law, it's not allowed to forge evidence. At least I have to praise you for being very professional. If I use the truth to get justice, I think I'm more trustworthy than you. My head was pounding from not sleeping all night, but I didn't allow myself to get caught up in my personal feelings. I still had work to do. That afternoon, I went back to find the old man, the important witness. This time, I showed him my identification papers. Oh, you're a lawyer? That's surprising. My nephew, Kuan, also said he wants to study law. I hope he'll be as successful as you in the future. The old man's attitude was very friendly, but when I asked him to testify in court, he hesitated a bit. Going to court to tell ghost stories? Will people believe it? You just need to tell the truth, what you saw. As for whether it was a ghost or a real person, let the jury decide. That's right. Let me ask my nephew's opinion, and then I'll give you an answer later. Of course, if you need more time, just contact me. Leaving the old man's house, I returned to the office and saw the assistant carrying 2 boxes of roasted duck. While eating, he asked, how do you plan to explain Lin Xiaolian's confession? I'll meet Lan Jie tonight. We needed to find the truth, but more importantly, we had to construct a truth that was convincing enough for the jury. The last piece of the puzzle was Lan Jie. July 28, 2003, the second trial. This time, the court was much more crowded than the previous trial. Reporters and news hunters filled almost every seat. Everyone was eagerly waiting for Miss Lin Xiaolian's outcome. We submitted the surveillance video as evidence, and also brought the old man to testify. However, the prosecution had prepared very carefully. They argued that the video did not show the face clearly, and based on the gait or clothing alone, it was impossible to determine that it was Lin Ji. They then questioned the old man about the distance when he saw the man that day. How far were you from him? Probably about 5 meters, very close. Are you sure you're not mistaken? Definitely. My eyesight is better than that young man's. But according to the testimony, that person was wearing a hat that covered half of his face. So how can you be sure it was Lin Ji? This, thanks to the scar on his eyebrow, it's very easy to recognize. The prosecutor raised his hand to present to the judge, Your Honor, we have prepared a set of photos. Please allow the witness to identify himself to check the accuracy of the testimony. I objected. Objection. The prosecutor is deliberately trying to mislead by giving unrelated tests. However, the judge allowed him to continue. The old man was still very confident. Okay, let's try. The prosecutor showed a series of photos of young men with similar appearances, each photo held for about 2 seconds before moving on to the next. When he got to the third photo, the old man suddenly exclaimed, Wait a minute. Are you sure that's Lin Ji? The old man looked closely, then shook his head. No. The prosecutor continued to show the photos, but when the series of photos ended, the old man still insisted, There is no photo of Lin Ji. The prosecutor was silent. The atmosphere in the courtroom became tense. The judge asked, Prosecutor, what is your opinion? The prosecutor was forced to admit, Your Honor, in the series of photos just now, there is no photo of Lin Ji. The old man laughed triumphantly, See? I told you, I am not mistaken. The reporters took notes and took photos. This was clearly a dramatic moment. I breathed a sigh of relief. The prosecutor had fallen into the trap they had set for us. I stood up and explained, Your Honor, the prosecutor asked the witness to identify a person who was not in the series of photos. This is clearly an act of deceiving the witness. The prosecutor immediately argued, Your Honor, based on the DNA test, we still confirm that the body is Lin Ji. The trial continued. The prosecutor spoke up, The camera only recorded images from the side, and the witness also only identified people with very similar appearances. There are many people in this world who look alike, such as twins, or people who intentionally disguise themselves. How can we confirm that it is Lin Ji based on just a brief glance at a short distance? The defendant's lawyer is deliberately arguing that Lin Ji's death was faked, just to protect his client. I stood up to argue. The DNA evidence presented by the prosecution was compared between the body, Lin Ji's adoptive mother, and Lin Ji's hair sample that was kept. However, both of these sources of samples could have been tampered with or exchanged. The body was also smashed to hide the fact that Lin Ji was still alive. The prosecutor immediately objected. Objection. What the defense attorney said was purely subjective speculation, without any factual basis. And more importantly, the defendant confessed that he was the one who killed Lam Chi. I calmly presented, Your Honor, I would like to present another piece of evidence. This evidence will explain why my client pleaded guilty. The judge nodded in approval. Your Honor, this is evidence PP 19. This is a collection of photos taken from Lam Chi's camera, showing that he secretly took photos of the defendant's daughter. Before I could finish my sentence, the defendant Lam Tu Lin screamed in despair, No. Don't drag my daughter into this. He's crazy. He deserves to die. He deserves to die. The judge banged his gavel and sternly reminded, Defendant, please maintain order in the courtroom. I looked straight at Lin Xiao Lian and slowly said, Lin Ji secretly took pictures of your daughter in a nude state while she was bathing. These pictures were collected and will be presented to the court with the defendant's permission. Lin Xiao Lian suddenly fell silent and looked at me in shock. Then I continued, Your Honor, to protect the identity of the defendant's daughter, I would like to call her Miss X. The judge nodded in agreement. I continued, From the evidence, we can see that Lin Ji installed a hidden camera in the bathroom to record Miss X bathing. At that time, she was only 14 years old, still a child. Lin Ji's behavior as a stepfather was no different from that of a pervert. The prosecutor immediately objected. Objection. This evidence is not relevant to the case. I retorted, Your Honor, this evidence is completely relevant. It was these images and videos that became the most powerful intimidation tools that Lin Ji used to threaten my client. This explains why she pleaded guilty. As a mother, she could not bear to see her daughter hurt. Therefore, she was willing to take the blame for someone else. The prosecutor objected again, objection. What the defendant's lawyer presented is completely without direct evidence to prove it. The judge asked, Lawyer, do you have any evidence to prove that Lam Chi ever threatened the defendant? I took a deep breath and replied, Your Honor, I would like to present evidence pp. 20. This is a copy of the defendant's call and text history. Through analysis, we found that at noon on the island that day, she received 2 calls from an unknown number and a text message with the content, Your daughter is very beautiful, right? This is a blatant threat aimed at your daughter. The prosecutor argued, this unknown number could belong to anyone. Many people have received advertising calls or gambling messages from unknown numbers. It is impossible to confirm that this is a threat, and it is even more impossible to link it to Lam Chi. I replied, My client has remained silent until now, because she is too scared. She lives in constant fear for her daughter's safety. The judge asked again, Lawyer, do you have any direct evidence linking this message to Lin Ji? I bowed my head and replied, Your Honor, I do not. The judge turned to the jury will consider this evidence reasonably. The judge continued to ask, both sides, is there any other evidence you would like to present? Both sides answered, no. The judge nodded, then prepare for your closing arguments. The prosecutor continued to assert in his closing statement that Lin Xiao Lian was a liar. Everything she did was to create false evidence, to escape punishment. When it was my turn, I stood up and spoke slowly and sincerely, Your Honor, it is true that my client hid the truth at first. But she did so only to protect her daughter, in a situation where she had no other choice. There are still many questions in this case. First, Lam Chi had every motive to stage a fake death. He was a gambler, violent, had secretly filmed his stepdaughter, and had many other illegal activities. He may have gotten into serious trouble and needed a way to escape. Second, why did he bring my client to the island that night? It was clear that he wanted to use her as a tool to create a fake crime scene. Third, the witness saw the man on the island. If it wasn't Lam Chi, then who was it? But if it was him, whose body was this? Finally, my client had no time to return to the scene and destroy the body after being assaulted and having to flee the beach. The closing arguments were suffocating, with all eyes on the jury's decision. If the defendant was really talented enough to create false evidence, how could she be trapped in such a tragic marriage? How could she stand before the bar? How could she plead guilty in the first place? In fact, this is just a fragile and weak woman. When she encountered a threat, she chose to shoulder everything, as a form of atonement, because she felt that her daughter's misfortune was partly caused by her. But fortunately, her extremely brave daughter stood up to protect her mother. For the mother and daughter, Hong Kong was a place full of promises of freedom, equality, and a good life. But they were pushed into endless tragedy just because they met an evil person. Our law respects the principle of the benefit of the doubt is on the defendant's side. Therefore, I implore the jury to carefully consider all points of doubt and declare that the defendant Lam Tu Lin is not guilty of murder. Please give this poor mother and daughter a chance to live a normal, peaceful life. As the jury could not reach a conclusion on the same day, the case was adjourned to the next day for sentencing. Chapter 5. I have never felt so nervous, even more than the most important exams. Every moment of waiting for the results became endless. When the results were finally announced, my heart was pounding uncontrollably, my hands and feet were shaking slightly. Judge, jury, have you reached a verdict yet? The jury representative, Your Honor, we have a verdict. With a ratio of 5 to 2, the jury finds the defendant guilty of murder, not guilty. We won. At that moment, all the pressure, conflict, and doubt disappeared. Only the feeling of extreme joy remained. My student and I hugged each other tightly in joy. No one remembered what the truth behind it was, everyone was just immersed in the feeling of victory. After the resounding victory, Lam Tu Lin was declared innocent and released right in court. Her eyes filled with gratitude, she said two short words, "Thank you. That's what I should do." I asked my colleague to escort Lam Tu Lin out to avoid the press. Leaving the court, my student and I accepted an interview from the press. Reporter, Lawyer Fuang, how do you feel about winning this case? I replied, being able to use the law to protect justice, I feel very proud. Reporter, do you really believe that Lam Tu Lin did not commit murder? I replied, the jury has made a verdict. Hong Kong law always takes the principle of it is better to let go than to arrest the wrong person as the top principle. We should maintain the spirit of questioning and seeking the truth. Chapter 6. The Lin Xiaolian case left a lasting impression. I was called the king of the law and received many invitations to participate in TV shows and magazine interviews. My career has since taken off like a kite. However, the biggest question about the truth of the case seems to have been forgotten or intentionally buried. Nearly a year later, while attending a conference in Hong Kong, I happened to meet Lin Xiaolian's daughter, Lin Jia, with a young man. Lin Jia happily greeted me, Lawyer Feng, long time no see. I asked, how are you and your mother doing? She replied, my mother is currently recuperating in mainland China. This is my boyfriend, Liang Yukuan. I carefully observed Liang Yukuan, a short, bespectacled, and rather shy young man. He was the grandson of the old grocery store owner I had invited to testify in court. A truth suddenly flashed through my mind. The person behind this whole incident, the one who helped Lin Xiaolian and her mother escape, was probably this young man. A person as obscure as a devil, never appearing in public, but secretly orchestrating everything. Such a person was truly terrifying. How to save the situation? Lin Ji held Lin Jia's sensitive secrets in his hands, using them to threaten her. In order to protect her daughter, Lin Xiaolian could not report to the police. This was a difficult situation. But then, the young man came up with a plan to completely solve the Lin Ji problem. Part 18, Liang Yukuan's plan. Liang Yukuan realized that simply killing Lin Ji would leave behind a lot of trouble. First of all, it was almost impossible to escape all suspicion. As the wife, Lin Xiaolian was always considered the number one suspect. Even if she created an alibi, she could still be suspected of hiring someone to kill her husband. And even if she escaped the crime, she and her daughter would have to face revenge or persistent stalking from Lin Ji. Liang Yukuan realized that there was only one perfect plan to make Lin Ji disappear in a way that made people believe that he was still alive. The story on Jiuzhou Island. On the fateful night, when Lin Ji was forcing Lin Xiaolian into a corner, Liang Yukuan suddenly appeared and used a hard object to knock him unconscious. For Lin Xiaolian, she really thought that Liang Yukuan was just helping negotiate with Lin Ji to resolve the issue. But in reality, after knocking Lin Ji unconscious, Liang Yukuan immediately killed him and hid the body. To distract attention, he brought another, pre-prepared, body to the scene, created a fake scene, and destroyed the face so that it could not be recognized. Everything had been carefully prepared by Liang Yukuan in advance. Liang Yukuan had probably admired Lin Jia for a long time. Furthermore, Liang Yukuan was a member of the university debate team and was very intelligent. But due to his humble background, he could not go far in his career. That made him a perfect factor, both motivated and skilled. The old man may have been involved in the plan, at least indirectly. Liang Yukuan somehow arranged for Lin Ji to appear frequently near the old man's shop, making a strong impression on him. When the time came, the old man was ready to testify that he saw Lin Ji after the day he was supposed to die. In addition, he may have been prompted or led to make confusing arguments for the prosecutor, creating reasonable doubt that helped the jury declare Lin Xiaolian innocent. Chapter 7, The Heartbreaking Secret. Lin Jia was Lin Ji's victim. He had sexually assaulted her. The first time she met me, Lin Jia told me this truth. That explains why Lin Xiaolian was ready to plead guilty. She did not want that painful truth to be exposed to the public, causing further harm to her daughter. To protect her daughter, Lin Xiaolian only dared to submit the photos in Lin Ji's bathroom, instead of the entire evidence. Lin Jia, a brave young girl, was the biggest victim in this tragedy. In the end, the anger and hatred towards the evil Lin Ji urged her and the good friend to come up with a plan to free herself and her mother. Although the plan was completed, all of these things will forever be buried secrets. In the end, this little bit of information will also be buried in the backlog of case files. Or on a quiet night, when facing her soul, it will be forgotten in the flow of time. Okay, admit that the entire truth told is just speculation. As for the real truth, like Lin Ji's body, was buried on the island, and will probably never be seen again. Chapter 8. September 1, 2024, my daughter became a law student at the port. I told a story. I was stunned for a long time before speaking. Did Lin Xiaolian take advantage of the good and the bad before? Or were we taken advantage of by Lin Xiaolian? Maybe so. I considered myself a rational and objective person, but I had never thought of this possibility, or maybe I didn't want to think about it. From the beginning, I had placed Lin Xiaolian in an inviolable position, and my absolute reason was also melted and collapsed by tears. I said to my daughter, after you graduate, perhaps the so-called truth won't always be for us to find, and sometimes we don't want to find it. If the truth is relative, then what should we base our decisions on? Personal interests? Is that okay? Maybe so. But try to keep a balance between reputation and conscience. Maybe that's the price of becoming an adult. The daughter propped her chin up in thought, challengingly asking, if I become a legal aid lawyer in the future, I might never get a break, right? Of course. Are you disappointed with your choices? Of course. But if I didn't, I wouldn't have the freedom I have now. You have to step into the darkness so your children can see the light, right? I reminded her. I hope you can always follow your heart. But don't forget that human nature is very complicated. Always stay alert and cautious. Yes, Mom. Keep it up. If you like it, please give the channel a like and subscribe to hear more stories.